Hello, welcome to Seniority. I'm your host, Robbie Haig, and today I'm talking with Randy Hunt, who is state rep and who is running for re-election after his first term. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Thank you very much, Robbie. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you.
I understand this is your 20th show here in Sandwich, which is
yes.
great, but that you've been doing the show for years before.
And climbing, yeah.
That's terrific. Do you live here in Sandwich?
I live in South Plymouth, so I'm
you
10
make the
minutes
commute
away.
down here
Oh,
then.
yeah.
Great.
Across the bridge.
Well, it's interesting because the 5th Barnstable district that I represent actually has moved to the west and picked up one of the precincts in Barnstable, the Ponds of Plymouth. I'm sorry, in Plymouth County, the Ponds of Plymouth, by head of the Bay Road and going back towards the northwest from there. That's precinct number 9 over in Plymouth.
Very good.
So
yeah,
maybe some people over there might get to see this too.
I think they will,
Terrific.
And I think they'll appreciate it too. Tell us a little about your background, Randy.
Sure, be happy to. I moved here in 1998. I came up here to be the CFO of a company, a public company over in New Bedford called Aerovox. Actually came here first as the corporate controller and then was promoted to the CFO, that's Chief Financial Officer position, a couple of years after that. And we chose to live in Sandwich because I was going to be commuting to New Bedford, but we looked for places that had the best school systems around. And at the time I had read a rating that put Duxbury and Sandwich right even keel with each other. We weren't making enough money to live in Duxbury, so
or Deluxeberry, as some people call it.
As they call it, right? And so we decided to make the commute from Sandwich and moved out to a house in right off of Old County Road. So I was commuting from exit 4 out to New Bedford every day. And so that's what brought us up here.
From where?
From Texas, from El Paso, Texas.
Oh.
I was with the company down in El Paso, Texas. I was the plant manager of a plant down that had distribution in El Paso and had a manufacturing plant in Juarez, Mexico. So I had done that for about 3 different companies for about 8 years. Spoke Spanish pretty fluently at the time. Kind of lost a lot of it since then, but I can probably hold my own in a Mexican restaurant.
Oh, very good. They say if you don't use it, you lose it.
You know, it is true, and I don't really have much of an opportunity up here to do that.
True.
But I certainly don't regret putting in all the wood shedding that it takes to try and learn a new language.
Very good.
So that was what brought us up here in '98. We have, Mary is my wife, and we have 6 kids. It's a Brady bunch.
Wow.
4 from my first marriage and 2 from her first marriage. And they're all grown and out of the house. The youngest one is in the Air Force over in Italy. And my oldest one is a CPA, just like me. She works in Dallas at Ernst & Young, which is one of well, it used to be a big 8 firm. Now I like to call them the final 4 because they've all consolidated into the last 4. So, and everybody in between's all over the place and working, and we have 6 grandkids too.
Oh,
so
my goodness. You're
making progress on that front.
Absolutely wonderful. And you still get an opportunity to go back to Texas.
We do.
Since she's there.
We try and get down there every year, sometimes driving, sometimes flying.
Yeah.
I kind of like driving down there because it's just beautiful country going through New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and, you know, the whole way down there. It's kind of an amazing thing. You cross through probably 9 states on day 1 of the journey.
Excellent.
And on the 3rd day when we're crossing Texas, it's all Texas all day long. It's about 850 miles across, which is an unbelievable thing.
And we have a beautiful country.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely great. I love the drive. It seems crazy. I think maybe in another life I might have been a truck driver. Who knows? But we had our kids up this summer, and you know, they drove their van up from Dallas. This is my oldest daughter and her husband and 3 of the grandkids. So we had a great summer, and we had a very busy legislative session. A lot of things happened.
Right.
And now it's the end of the formal sessions, which means that the roll call votes where we push the A and nay buttons is essentially over unless we get called back. probably won't be called back until the next session starts. Although business continues to roll in Beacon Hill, and all of those bills, including some that I have up there that don't require roll call votes, will still be dispensed with before the end of the actual session, which is at the end of the year.
Tell us about some of them.
Well, we had a lot of important things happen. I'd probably have to put at the top of the list the work that I was doing on the Joint Committee for Mental Health and Substance Abuse. And we listened to a number of independent freestanding bills that were dealing with prescription drugs and the abuse and addiction that go along with prescription drugs.
Right.
And so what the committee did was put together a composite or an omnibus bill of about a dozen of these freestanding bills, plus we added a number of things ourselves. And what we came up with was Senate 2125, which is a bill that deals with prescription drug abuse and all kinds of aspects related to that. And I'm very proud to say we pushed it, we were successful. We had a big forum down here in March to get a lot of public exposure to it. It was over at the Sandwich High School. And then right at the end of the session, we were getting a little worried, this is the end of July, that we might not have the oomph to get over the finish line because there's a lot of competing bills that people are trying to get finished in the last few days of the formal session.
Sure.
So we I have about 125 people that are active in recovery as a profession, and people that are affected by it, parents, support groups. And I got the word out that we needed to have people up in Boston at the State House on Monday, the day before the session ended, to gather and start knocking on the doors of the legislators and say, this is really important, we need to pass this bill.
Right. And basically, what are you doing? What would the bill...
Here, the biggest thing, there's lots of different things, but I'll touch on this one major piece of it. And that is that the state has what's called the Prescription Monitoring Program. And part of that is a database of prescribers' information on when they prescribe opiate drugs, like OxyContin or Percocet or Vicodin, those types of things. The database also grabs information from the pharmacies who are filling those prescriptions. And the way that it works now, unfortunately, is not very effective because only 5% of those doctors and dentists and others that can prescribe these drugs actually participate in the database. This bill says, we're going to sign you up automatically when you renew your license over the next 3 years so we can get 100% participation in this. And then what it says is, and this is to stop doctor shopping, and what that is people that go to multiple doctors with back pain or whatever, but what they're looking for is multiple prescriptions, oftentimes not only for themselves, but to actually sell illegally out on the street. You can get somewhere around $80, $85 for a single OxyContin pill on the street. So what this bill does is say, you must be in the database, and before you see a new patient, you must consult the database to find out if you're dealing with somebody who's running around getting these prescriptions. It works now, but only for those 5% of the people that are part of the system. There are other things, including banning bath salts, which is they call it bath salts, but what it is about 20 different, maybe 15 different chemical combinations that are sold as bath salts at head shops. You probably haven't been into a head shop lately, neither have I. Gas stations and places, and people actually crunch this stuff up and snort it, and they get an unbelievable reaction to that. Sometimes killing them on the first time that they try it. Those combinations of chemicals were legal in Massachusetts until we passed this bill. So there are a number of things in there, and I should mention at this point, you can follow along with what's been happening very easily if you just, in your search browser, if you Google Randy Hunt State Rep, you'll find my state rep site. On the front page, A lot of the details about what I've done in the first term are laid out in an article called First Term Accomplishments.
Excellent. So people can go in there and be assured that they want you back?
Yeah, they'll see 14 different things that I've been working on, and every one of those just about has links to other articles that I've written about the bills, press releases about them. If you really want to know what's going on with a particular bill that I've been working on, you can find out about it.
Excellent, excellent.
Another thing that I wanted to mention, one of the first term accomplishments is as a CPA, a practicing CPA, and a little bit older, you know what, I'm getting the gray hair thing going here too.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
We're all getting into that. I took it very seriously, this job, and wanted to be there. And it's turned out that the idea of showing up for everything has been highly valuable. That may seem like a crazy thing to say, oh, you know, how about just showing up? Well, I showed up. I have a 100% voting record, the only one on Cape Cod. Nobody else on Cape Cod's done that.
Yeah.
Although we did have about 20 out of our minority caucus, I'm a Republican, about 20 out of the 33 that did have 100% voting records, so that was good.
That's very good.
And I went to all of my 3 joint committee meeting hearings, and that would entail the Joint Committee on Elder Affairs, the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Abuse that I mentioned earlier, and also the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. I made all of those hearings, and I have to say, it's a little bit shameful in a way that we could have a committee of 13 people that meet in Boston. Some of the people who testify in front of us may have driven from all the way in Western Mass, maybe from Pittsfield to come and testify about some bill. And then you go into the hearing room and the Senate chairman, the House chairman are there, and 2 or 3 of the rest of us, and that's it. And so imagine, it's almost you know, a kick in the ribs for somebody to like travel all that way and then have just a fraction of the committee listen to your testimony.
Almost like not taking it seriously enough.
I would agree. And so I made the commitment to show up at all of those meetings. And a side light of that was I got to know the chairman of all of my committees very well. And that is how I got very involved in some of these bills that we worked on. And it's turned out to be very fruitful for me as a first-term representative.
Excellent. That's very impressive. Some of the other things that you have accomplished?
Well, I would say one of the things, I'll tell you about something that I did not expect. Because sometimes you run on things and you think you're going to work on those things, and usually you do, but then there are other things that pop up that you weren't expecting. One of those turned out to be the storm response by our monopoly-run utilities. In the case of Cape Cod, it's National Grid for gas, and it's Instar for the electricity, but primarily for Instar here, although National Grid does electricity in other parts of the state. In fact, they do more than Instar, or at least did more than Instar before they merged with Northeast Utilities. So one of the things that happened was we had a hurricane that turned into Tropical Storm Irene. Well, Irene came through here, forceful winds. However, the peak gust, I think, was 82 miles an hour that was recorded over at the Mass Maritime Academy. So not hurricane. Well, that's level. That gust would be you know, above the hurricane level 1, which is 75 miles an hour, I think.
Enough to keep us indoors.
But only one gust. We weren't sustaining those types of winds. What happened was we had trees down all over the place. We had Instar come up with a response by putting a bunch of crews on the road, which is fine, and I take nothing from all the people that work to get trees cut out of the way, lines back up. They did the very best that they could, I'm sure of that. However, the customer service piece of it was just woeful. When you would call, you'd get a recording. Literally, we had the storm on Sunday. I called Monday morning. The recording that I got was, We should have your power up by Saturday, 10 p.m.
Wow.
Well, you know that they weren't waiting until Saturday at 10 p.m. to restore everybody's electricity. Right. That, you know, they figured out where they're going to go. They have to do the repairs. They get the most people back online first.
Right.
I mean, I assume that they have a plan like that, and I know they do.
We'd hope, yeah.
But what we were told, Saturday, 10 p.m. On Tuesday, I called Saturday at 10 p.m. Well, this is, you know, if you have a small business that maybe is running out of your house, or even in an office and it has no power, Saturday at 10 is not a good answer. Right. If you have a freezer full of food and refrigerator, and if you knew that it was the electricity would be back in 24 hours versus Saturday at 10 p.m.,
right,
you might make a decision that would be different.
Right.
So they gave us no information. Now, of course, they started putting back tens of thousands of people on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but never did they tell us when to expect to come back on.
Oh, okay.
So I took that problem, I wrote a letter to the chairman of the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee, and I said, we need to look into this because I think the standards for storm response clearly are not good enough.
Okay.
And the Department of Public Utilities also felt the same way. And you might have read in the paper or heard on the news recently that that accelerated into the Attorney General actually levying a $16 million fine against National Grid and a $10 million fine against Instar. And so they found the same thing. But when the DPU, the Department of Public Utilities, was going around the state getting public information on these storm responses, and the one was Hurricane Irene, or Tropical Storm Irene. The other was that October snowstorm, which didn't really affect us. But in other parts of the state, they were knocked out for a week or more. So they had a hearing over at Barnstable High School. I was the only state rep who went, and I testified. And there were many public safety officials that testified. And Therese Murray's office had a representative there. She testified. So there were several, but state reps didn't come for that, unfortunately. And what happened was the DPU took that information, which in the end of the day resulted in these fines against these monopoly utilities. And for the committee, we actually did write a new set of standards for storm response. And that's one of the bills that we got passed this year I'm very proud of.
Very good.
But not one that when I was running in 2010 I had any idea we would work on. So some of that's kind of unpredictable. You know, I did run on trying to do something about prescription drugs and the abuse that goes along with those, and we did a lot on that.
Very good.
So there are those things that you say I'm going to do and you do. But you never know what might come up in between.
And being there 100% of the voting time, I'm sure you're availed of all of the new and interesting things that are coming up. If you weren't there, you'd miss some.
You have to be there to do that.
This
job is it's broken into three pieces in a way. The two most important pieces for me is stuff that happens in Boston, and that's the voting, going to the hearings, understanding the bills, pushing those bills, listening to constituent groups on both sides. That's one part of it. That's the legislative part. The second leg of a three-legged stool, if you will, is constituent services. Constituent services, it's huge. I didn't realize the extent that people use their state rep's office to get help, but let me tell you, the labyrinth of rules and regulations and agencies and who to talk to is daunting for a lot of people. And so when they get frustrated, they will call our office. Suzanne Kelsch, who is my legislative aide, fields initially those calls. And we help them navigate that. Most of the time, just putting a constituent in touch with the right person is all we need to do. Sometimes it requires a lot more hand-holding and some cajoling and essentially pestering some of these agencies until we get a result. But we do a very good job of that, so much so that I actually get people from other rep districts who call me because they just don't feel like that they're getting ahead there.
How complimentary.
It is, and we're very
Yes.
proud of those services.
That's
The
being
third
said.
leg of the stool, by the way, is running for re-election.
Oh,
And,
yes.
you know, because if you don't get elected, you can't do this stuff, and that's a reality.
Absolutely. That's the truth.
So every 2 years, just like the U.S. Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives, you work to be reelected. So because the time is short, although twice as long as what the term was when we first created this Constitution in 1780, then it was 1 year, and they were wondering if that might be too long a commitment, because everybody had jobs to do, and you know, this was not what it is today. Nonetheless, what you do is every 2 years you have to go out to be reelected if you so choose to run for the office again. And so it does tie up, unfortunately, I think a little more time than I would really like.
Yeah.
When I was 2 terms as a selectman, it was 3 years, and the race was very compressed. You know, you're talking about 5 or 6 weeks total. 30 days before the election, you pop out a bunch of signs and you run around holding, waving signs and knocking on doors, and it's really compressed into about 6 weeks. Here it seems to kind of be an ongoing process from the time we turn in our nomination papers, which is about the end of May, until about the end of May until November 6th. So it's a much longer period.
How do you feel about term limits?
I'd have no problem with term limits. I think that, you know, years ago, I always thought everybody is term limited by the voters. And in the purest sense, that's true.
Yes.
There's no question that you can take anybody out you want to. But the power of the incumbency is such that 97% of incumbents in the state legislature who run for re-election get voted back in. And that's for a number of reasons. They could be doing a good job. That's one thing.
Very good, hopefully.
They might have a pretty big war chest that keeps other people from thinking that they have a shot at that position. And there's, you know, the power of the incumbency also includes constituent services. You help a lot of people. You're not doing it to be reelected. You're doing it because it's part of your job. But you do touch people and help them. And that's another reason why people might vote for you again. So I've kind of changed my thinking on term limits, thinking that essentially at 97% reelection rate, everybody who's there pretty much can stay there as long as they want to. And it's unusual for somebody to get bucked out. We have to get the people out there to vote. That's absolutely right. The important thing. In our election coming up in November, there will be huge get out the vote efforts from the top of the ticket for U.S. president all the way down. So in a presidential year, we get a pretty good percentage of the people out. I mean, we get excited if we get to 70 or 80%, which is, that would be wonderful. 70 is what? That's probably a low C in school, you know, or you're getting down to the maybe a D in some places. So I'd love to see 98% of the people come out to vote. That would be wonderful. But in many towns and many places, 70% would be absolutely that's true. Fantastic. Well, look at the other elections. When when I was running for local office, if you nudged up above 20%, it was a victory. How sad. Which is very sad. I agree with that. So there are, you know, I would support that. I have no problem with it. The other thing that I would say is we have an open meeting law. And that applies to selectmen, all elected boards, all appointed boards, all these public boards. But guess who it does not apply to? State legislature. State legislature has exempted itself. Yes, this is so amazing. We can meet behind closed doors. And let me tell you what, meetings behind closed doors, although they do keep the minority party out, there's 33 of us out of 160 who are Republicans in the House of Representatives. So, you know, we're like a super minority, basically. It keeps us out. But you know what? It keeps out really all but about 20 of the Democrats as well. The people that are kind of in the leadership team and a circle around them, they get to participate in those backroom meetings. But the average Democrat who is a legislator up there they don't get to those behind closed door
That's a
meetings
shame.
either.
That's
and
a
so
shame.
it locks out most of the people who are trying to represent you as a
Right.
state representative or a state senator.
Well, this has been wonderful.
Great.
And you being part of Local Access TV know how time flies.
I know, it does fly. It's sort of why I've been thinking I've been talking pretty fast, but
Yeah, very
I do
good.
appreciate
Well,
the
it's
fact that this happens.
And it's a pleasure to have you here.
I appreciate that, Robbie.
And I
let
wish
me tell
you
you,
luck.
reminder
Yes.
our viewers,
Yes.
Randy Hunt, State Rep, just Google it, or Randy Hunt blog if you want to see something more entertaining, go there.
Excellent.
And you'll find out lots about me.
Thank you very much, Randy. It's just been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. This is Robbie Haig, your host, and I'm hoping to see you again real soon.